So I'm very excited to share with you today this new monitor that was sent to me by, at first I was calling it Avideone, but I think it's Avideone. But I was sent this for free for review, but don't think that's going to influence me in one way or another. I've already developed my own personal opinions on this monitor overall, and I'll be talking about both the pros and the cons. So let's start off by talking about some of the stats about the monitor. So it is a 7-inch monitor. It does have touchscreen capabilities, and the resolution is about 1920 by 1200. So now if we take a look at the overall body of this thing, you'll notice on the top there's only 3 buttons, one of which is to cut it on and off. There's an input button to switch back and forth between HDMI and SDI, and there's also a function button. If we hit the function button, right now that button is set to peaking, so you can kind of go in and control that function to be on other presets if you need those more so than others. And if we look at the sides and the bottom of this particular device, you'll see that there are 3 places where we can mount this. So we can mount it from the left, the right, or the bottom. So whether you're mounting this to the top of your camera, some sort of cage system, or you're putting it off to the side, you at least have a lot of variety there as to where it's actually going to go. Now, if we take a look at the back of this particular monitor, you'll notice there's a lot of different areas here. So if you look to the bottom left, over on the side, you'll see that there's something that says camera control. But one of the things you can do with this monitor is when you plug it into your camera, you can control certain features such as zoom or focus, depending on if your camera allows that or not, or if you have the proper cables. Over on the right side, you'll see that it says ear, and of course, this is just where you simply plug in your headphones. Now, I will note really quickly, when I first got this monitor and plugged it in, I didn't have any headphones plugged in, and I noticed there was a lot of echo coming out of the monitor, so it does have internal speakers that will project audio as well. It doesn't sound that great. I wouldn't recommend using it. So here in a minute, when we get into the menus, I'll show you some different ways that you can cut those features off. Now, jumping back to the back side of the monitor, you'll notice that there are SDI and HDMI in and outs. You'll also see that there's a spot to put in a USB. And I feel like this is for applying LUTs, so you can see what your end result's going to look like while in the monitor, just to make sure everything's nice and neat. There's also 2 battery slots here for NPF battery attachments. So one side, you can actually put a battery in there to charge the device if you don't want to use a external power source, or maybe you're out in the middle of a field. And the other side can actually do another thing or two. So you can actually charge other devices by plugging into that one side, so they'll get a charge and power from it as well. Or you can put in some type of wireless receiver for different types of things you might be using. And then the last piece here, there actually is a DC7 option to plug this in. Now, I will note here that I do have mine plugged in through the DC7, but that's with the power supply that went with my other monitor. Unfortunately for me, in the package, I did not receive a power cable to plug this in. In fact, the only thing I received was literally just the plug that goes into the wall, not even the part with all the circuitry that maintains the flow of electricity. So that was a little bit unfortunate, but thankfully I did have what I needed to make it work. Not saying that's going to happen to you, but full disclosure, it happened to me. Now, before we jump into actually looking at the monitor menus and kind of how well it performs, I do want to show you a few other things that came with the monitor. So I did get this particular cable here. I did get this mounting bracket here, so this will connect to the hot shoe on top of your camera, but you can also screw this portion off and pretty much mount this piece to any other thing, if I can get that off of there. I already have one of these as a part of my small rig system, but it's always nice to have some extra equipment and hardware just in case you might need it in the future. Then the final thing that came, they actually did send me a HDMI to micro 4/3 or HDMI mini. I can't remember exactly. This is the exact one that plugs into my camera. This is just about half the length of the one that I use. So again, this is just an extra piece that I can put aside. So now let's take a look at the overall monitor home screen, as I'm calling it. So you can see here, I have myself. There is a center point focus there, which can be turned on or off. And then you have your RGB parade here at the bottom. You have a vector scope, and you also have your white balance. Now up here in the top right-hand corner, you can see my audio levels are there, so I can continually monitor those to make sure it's okay. Because when I'm making these YouTube videos, I'm not going to wear headphones the entire time to make sure everything sounds good, so it's nice to be able to watch the monitors over here. Now, to get into your menu settings, that's as simple and as easy as swiping on a cell phone. You start at the top, and you simply just swipe down. So now you have all your different options across, including your input. You can control your waveforms, your vectors, your histogram, and choose kind of all the different factors in that. Here is a peaking section, which we saw with the function button earlier. So we can actually turn peaking off, and then you notice all the little dots around me are gone. You can cut it back on. You can control the intensity of the peaking and also change those colors. Going on over, we have options for false color as well as exposure. So if we just simply click here, now I have my false colors on. Then we go over, we have brightness, contrast, saturation, tint, sharpness, etc. So if you really want to fine tune and dial in the different settings of the monitor to get that look that you're needing, you can do that there. Go ahead and pull the menu back down. So here we have the display options. So we have anamorphic, we have aspect, we have scan. So if you need to change that overall aspect ratio or to see what your frame's going to look like as a final product, you can do that in here. Over here, you have the audio settings. So you could see we have our level meter. We can turn that on or off. Volume, I have it 0. As I mentioned, you might be able to hear a little bit of an echo and feedback. So let's just cut that right back off. And then finally, over here at the end, you do have different types of settings. Now, with any touchscreen monitor, or should be, or most touchscreen monitors, if I can get the menu to go away, you do have the option to pinch and zoom in and move around the frame. So if you just really want to fine tune your sharpening, make sure everything's in focus, you can do that. But overall, that's essentially the setup of this particular monitor. So here's my overall thoughts. Currently, I do see myself replacing my old Feelworld 4K monitor with this one. Even though I do lose a little bit of the overall resolution, I get a much larger screen. So I do like the functionality of a touchscreen menu system. I do like the size of this monitor. I feel like it reacts pretty quickly. And it's got a lot of great features in it that are going to be beneficial to me. Now, the cons I did have with the monitor is the internal speakers. They're awful, so never plan on using those. I wouldn't even consider that necessarily a feature unless it was the only option you possibly had. The other issue I have is where I didn't actually receive a power cable with this monitor. And I didn't reach out to them because it wasn't a huge deal because, again, I had one on hand. However, had I paid the full retail price for this, I probably would have been either asking for another monitor and exchanging it out, or at least just asking for them to send me a power cable. When we're talking about build quality, my Feelworld is a lot better because this is a pretty solid, somewhat thin metal material. So if I dropped this one, I wouldn't feel so bad if it fell, unless it fell on the screen. Whereas the other monitor for Avideone, it is more plasticky than this one. I don't feel like the build is as rugged, and for it to be a little bit more costly at $329 versus I think this one I paid sub $200, I would expect its build quality to be a little bit better. But with that being said, a lot of the additional features the other one did have, as such as the 2 different battery ports, having different types of video connectors to be able to go in here, having the option for the USB to go in there, and all of those things, I do think it makes it worth it. But I can say, at least for the time being, that is going to be my new go-to monitor, at least over the next few weeks, just to really make sure that it is the one that I want to use overall. I already do like it better than this one, but we'll see if there's any issues that happen in the weeks to come. But hope you enjoyed today's video, and as always, be sure to create something new today.